May I please have your attention? Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. On behalf of STPI, I welcome you all to the 25th Sustainable Development Conference. Today, the thematic session is titled Business Cooperation and Political Will, a Way Forward for SAARC. The promises made in SAARC Charter are yet to be visible in the form of greater political tolerance and positive economic benefits for the people of the region that were originally there by the leadership of the SAARC. What is lacking today may not be the political will in the broad sense of the term, but many confounding factors that impede SAARC players to boldly follow them on their pathway and for the goals of the regional cooperation, as the original leaders had done in accepting the basic principles during the early 80s. How can SAARC regain the momentum for the progress of regionalism? That is the debate for the today under this session. May I please introduce the worthy panelists? So we are really grateful that we are joined by distinguished panelists. I would like to introduce Dr. Rajan Sudesh Ratna, Deputy Head and Senior Economic Affairs Officer, UNESCAP, who is joining us today as chair of the session. We also have with us Mr. Zubair Ahmed Malik, former President, Federation of Pakistan Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Executive Member, SAARC CCI. We are joined online by Mr. Shafkat Haider, Chairman, ICT Council, SAARC, Chamber of Commerce and Industries. He is joining us from Bangladesh. We have with us Dr. Posh Raj Pandey, Chairman, South Asia Watch on Trade, Economic and Environment, and he is representing Nepal on the panel. And soon, shortly, we'll be joined by Dr. Lakmini Fernando, Research Economist, Institute of Policy Studies, IPS, Sri Lanka. May I please request upon the chair of the session to formally open the session and enlighten us with the initial remarks.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for this session and introduction, Dr. Faria. It is indeed a pleasure, and I'm indeed thankful to SDPI for giving this opportunity to me. Of course, not part of our original package, but anyhow, these are these emergency requirements as a co-partner of the big event. We have to take this responsibility. So apologies in advance if you find I'm not very well prepared to moderate or chair this session. We have very distinguished panelists and we have a limited time. All of you who have been attending for the last 3 days session, and including the one which was organized by UNESCAP on South and Southwest Asia Sustainable Development Forum. One of the very clear messages from all these multi-stakeholder consultations which emanated and which evolved policymakers, government officials, ex-government officials, think tanks, private sector, and civil society organization and public at large, because the number of people who have been participating here have been expressing their feelings, and it comes out very clearly that regional cooperation, or basically in South Asia, is one of the important dimension for shared prosperity. If the countries have to develop together, if the countries need to achieve the SDG goal, and if we are talking about the overarching theme of leaving no one behind, then to cooperate, to learn from each other, share the knowledge, whether it is a technology or it is a good practice, is very, very important. Coming to this dimension, and we all know, I will come to the political will on a later. But the first and foremost, which is very important, and there is an emerging need, is the lost opportunities of business within South Asia. Uh, Economic activity and social activities and the social challenges bring common problems, including the one which relate to a climate change or environment. Uh, Especially the climate change or environmental issues are across the border. They are not bound by the border. So unless the countries cooperate with each other, a better solution will not be available. SAARC, which emanated long back in middle of 1970s, and then you have SAARC Preferential Trading Agreement way back in 1993, 2004. We had a SAARC Free Trade Agreement, and there was a lot of goodwill talk, analytical reports which were written as to how the countries would benefit within the South Asia through this regional integration. Unfortunately, the intra-regional trade of South Asia is less than 5%. Sometimes it touches 5%. Intra-regional investment is less than 2%. Services trade is also less than 2% of what we are trading with the world. And even if you look at in the services, each of the SAARC country has around 35 to more than 50% of the GDP being contributed from the services. Now, if we do not integrate, and we are more integrating with the rest of the world and not within the region, then how we can talk about a regional integration? Coming to the cooperation, whether it is a larger charter of SAARC, which talks about many things. It talks about health, it talks about education, it talks about science, technology, it talks about environment, it talks about disaster, also economic cooperation and other things. Many things at technical level happened and then it got derailed. The background note very clearly specifies, so I'm not going to read that, but it says that the charter of the SAARC emanated that the bilateral relationships of conflict will not, be a deterrent to the process of cooperation in SAARC. But over the years, it has been seen, and it's not from a recent phenomena. Every time in the history, if you pick up the existence of SAARC, bilateral relationships have always been a deterrent to the process of SAARC cooperation. And that leads to those countries who are not in this conflicting zone or not in the bilateral strained relationship also suffer. There are 4 LDCs in South Asia. Afghanistan has its own challenge, but then we have a challenge of Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan. Bhutan is graduating very soon. Nepal and Bangladesh would be graduating in 2026. SAARC could have been a way out for their successful graduation as well. Why and how it or this narrative can be brought on a positive path is what I would look for this session to deliberate upon. We all know what are the challenges. We all know what have been the problems. We all know there are bilateral tensions. But that is a rhetoric. We need to talk something going beyond. The Sustainable Development Conference, which is organized by SDPI, also had one very strong message. People-to-people contact. And in technical terms, we talk about, track 1.5, track 2, track 2.5, we can continue talking about. But the political narratives also can be changed by the people's desire. What we need to do, there are private sector where you talk to, they all talk about, yes, we require this from all the sides they talk about. They need this. They want a free flow of goods, services, and investment. And we know, I mean, every country, their private sector has a very, very strong say in the government policy making. But why is it not happening? And I'm very happy that we have a former president of FPCCI and executive member of SAARC Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Even the SAARC Chamber of Commerce and Industry has been formulated for this business to business contact, but things perhaps are not happening that much, and even business to business interaction. And business to business interaction, SAARC visa for the business people is available, even is available now. But why is it that it's not happening? And then what needs to be done to change this political narrative is what one we need to look at. So the may I invite Mr. Zubair Ahmed Malik, the former president of APCCI and executive member of SAARC CCI, to deliberate upon.
Thank you, sir. First of all, let me start off by congratulating SDPI for arranging this. It's become an annual event of theirs, and we are associated with them for the last so many years. And it's been a pleasant reunion, and we have been trying to contribute what little we can together towards the development of South Asia. As our moderator, Dr. You are the, okay. Okay.
Don't need to call me Rajan, doctor.
Okay. As Rajan said, we have to look why in the last 75 years, SAARC still today is where it was in 1985 when it started. It started with a great fanfare, and we, the people of the private sector especially, had a very broad vision, a happy one, that at least this region is the time has come for the people to change the destiny of the people of South Asia. Where mostly nearly 40% of the people are living below the poverty line. And though the charter of this say the bilateral relations will not affect the working of the SAARC, this is exactly what is happening today. SAARC is plagued by the bilateral issues between the countries. And it's not only India and Pakistan, let me tell you. It's India, Pakistan, it's India, Sri Lanka, it's been India, Nepal, and so on and so forth. I'm not specifying. But the political will only comes if you can't find solution outwards. You have to look inwards to find a solution to a problem. And that's exactly what has been missing in this region. We have been looking to the old age, 75-year-old problems of Kashmir, and then the border issues between Nepal, and then the Tamil and other issues. They have been overshadowing the economic issues of the region. The role of private sector has not been as it should be. It's from personal experience, let me tell you, private sector is not operating independently of the government as it should be in other countries. As a matter of fact, they are taking dictates from the government and moving accordingly. With a stroke of pen, the whole 26 bodies of SAARC have been rendered ineffective. They cannot operate because their licenses have not been renewed. So how can we blame that the political will never be there until and unless the political persons start thinking out of box. We call ourselves democracies, but are really we a democracy anywhere in South Asian, in all the 8 countries? Even in India, which claims to be the biggest democracy in the world. I'm sorry, it's authoritarian democracy. Authored, cultured to the specific needs. And until and unless we come out of this approach, and same goes for Pakistan. And then another major factor has been the formation of blocks within the SAARC. There have been countries. Now, let me quote you a very clear example. When the last summit was due to take place in 2016, I suppose, in Nepal. A few days before the summit, a letter was issued stating a letter which was word to word, dot to dot, and comma to comma similar, issued from one embassy, and I'm not going to name the embassy. And the same letter was simultaneously issued from two other embassies that the summit should be postponed. And up to date, it's not been held. We have formed other regional groups. We are not against that, but BIMSTEC, you say, or there's another one, BBI, and so on. And I think the more the merrier. But if the motive is to isolate one or two countries, then the whole exercise becomes meaningless. I think it's a hard time we spoke up. The time is here that we should be honest, straightforward, and hit the nail on the head. I'm not a political person and I'll not indulge into the political field, but I do have the right to define the hurdles which the political people are creating in the development of this region. Your share of GDP in the world is less than 5%. And this part of the continent used to be called the food basket of the world. Where are we standing today? Pakistan is importing about 2 million tons of metric tons of wheat. And this is what is going on in other. See, dominance, we have to come out of the sphere of dominance. No country can dominate anyone in the present circumstances. When we talk of free world, we talk of freedom of speech, we talk of freedom of doing business, free market economy. There are essentials to this. And that is the mental approach of the governments. Recently, we have tried, and we will continue to try, because basically, government has no business to do business. It's the role of the private sector. But the private sector has been made ineffective by derecognition of the only bodies which were acting for the integration of the region. Today, all the 26 bodies are inoperative, including the SAARC Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Whereas it was a natural process that you didn't have to apply for the regularization of the charter or the license. It was done automatically whenever it used. But why all of a sudden this thing stopped? And it makes a big question mark on the role of the Secretary General of SAARC. And when he visited Pakistan, I talked with him. I said, it has been a regular process in the last 25 years. And all of a sudden you have de-recognized 26 bodies. You have deprived the quarter of world population of their right to meet, to do business, and to indulge in business activities. You, Dr. Rajan, you rightly pointed out as a role of the private sector, yes. But we can only play a role if we are given a level playing field. If the hurdles are not created in way of the people of this region.
Malik Saab, I will just stop you for a
You
minute
have the right.
Because I just have a burning question
Yes.
to what you said, and I will pick up from what you said is hit the nail on the head, right? and that is what I started. What you think, given your very vast experience? I mean, these are all challenges, problems, and bad things which are happening in the region that we all recognize. Uh, do we think, or do you really, your conviction is there that unless there is a recognition of these chambers or agencies, the trade will not happen? I don't think so. And what I want from you is, why is it that the private sector has to toe the line of the political bosses? Because there is a desire to work. Trade is happening, if not directly between India and Pakistan, through Dubai, through Singapore, through porous borders. It is happening. Why is it that the private sector is not? And I ask you another one question. COVID has really revolutionized the way we live in, and you don't require a visa to travel from one country to another country. Why is it that those chambers, even if they are de-recognized, cannot have an online meeting among themselves to sit? What I want from your very vast experience, and I know these white hairs are not धूप में सफेद नहीं किए हैं आपने. You have a legacy, you have a lot of experience, and you have the guts to say. And so I'm asking you, uh, two pointer, if you can say what need to be done, what could be the driver for our private sector?
Make the private sector a two-liner, independent of government influence. And if you want me to be more frank, ask FICCI to come forward and play its role. The role of FICCI has been very disappointing, and I'm saying it very loud and clear. They are not interested in SAARC anymore. And this has been conveyed to not to Pakistan, but to one of the SAARC countries, who is to take over as the presidency of SAARC from Pakistan. They paid a visit to India, and I'm saying it on record. Tiki said, we are not interested.
But do you think if they take the chairmanship, the problem should be solved, or trade will start happening?
No, it's not the question of, you are missing the point. I said the private sector should be made independent of the government influence. I'm not talking about the chair. I'm talking about the role of the private sector. And I initially said that private sector has started taking dictation from the governments. This is a step backward, not a step, but few steps backward. Until and unless we come out of it, a specific fundamentalist frame of mind, which is unfortunately now has taken roots in the subcontinent as a whole. Talibanization has not taken place in Pakistan or Afghanistan. It has taken place in India as well, in another form. Now I'm getting into deeper waters, and I think I should restrain myself here. These are the things which are hampering the progress of this continent, of 1/4 of the world population. What are we leaving? A legacy for our future generations. Trade, yes, as you rightly said, trade will never stop. Will you believe if I tell you that Pakistani LCs are being opened in China for importing machinery from India? Because water never stops. It finds its flow. And so same is the case with trade. We find ways and means to move on. But who is the ultimate loser? It's the people. Why? The revenues are going to the third countries, which could have been used for improving the life of the people of this region. This is when I say, hit the nail on the head. Let's not be diplomatic here. Sit, read a paper, and then say goodbye. Hi, Cherry. Well done. Well.
You need a bigger pill to transform, and so thank you very much for that. Let me come to Mr. Shafkat Haider, who is the chairman of ICT Council, SAARC, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Mr. Haider, you are online. He joined, right? He's online. So what do you think And now we are talking, you're also a chairman of ICT, and I said, online things are much more easier, better. You also come from private sector, and we had a very deep meaning thought coming from Mr. Malik. What is your take in it? Mr. Heather, you have the floor.
Thank you. First of all, assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon to all of you. I'd like to thank Dr. Suleri and his team from SDPI for holding its 25th Sustainable Development Conference, along with the Ministry of Planning, Development and Special Initiatives. This implies clearly that they believe in sustainability. However, I personally believe that rather than using sustainability as a buzzword, sustainability should be part of our DNA. You spoke about internet. Me being part of the Council of Communication and IT, I'd like to happily tell you that I'm a colleague of Mr. Zubair Malik on the EC of the SAARC Chamber of Commerce and Industries. Assalamu alaikum, Zubair bhai. Internet has actually made the world flat. There is literally zero lag time in information flow around the world. This makes us susceptible to all kinds of influences, some welcome, some not so welcome. What is happening right now with Mr. Malik has already very succinctly explained. I would like to endorse what he said fully, and I don't want to be repetitive on that. But I would just like to remind ourselves that the activities of business, society, as well as government are quite fundamental in the globe, which is influential on various aspects of daily life. Businesses act for the satisfaction of the needs of society through the access of different services and products in exchange of monetary benefit. The government is an individual structure that defines various rules and authorizes application of such rules and policies, which is composed of various methodologies, material things, ideas, and institutions. Hence, all the factors are mutually collaborated with one another, having great influence on one another through effective interactions. Now, Dr. Ratna, you mentioned one thing. I'd like to come to that point. You said that we are doing business in different ways and continuing to do business. Why do we need the government? I have a simple question to ask. Each country has a government and each country has a business of chamber. Why? Because the chamber or the federation of a country is the private sector counterpart to the government. The government is supposed to implement and do policies. The business people from the chamber disseminated among their business community how to go about it. Now, if each country, we have a federation or a business chamber, and we work with the government, the same example applies to the SAARC chamber. We report to our individual governments. At the same time, we work together unitedly to work for the region. So that is implicit in that as we are working internally with our governments, we should work externally with the regional partners. Now, when you say why you need the government, let me cite a couple of technical issues. We have this NTBs. We have mutual recognition agreements, MRAs. Okay? We have cross-border transaction issues. Now, who's going to do that? It's the government. They have to facilitate this in order to make the business people healthier and to allow them to do business in the proper way. Without RMAs, without NTBs, without cross-border transaction issues, without it being legal, how do you go ahead? There is just no way. So you need the government for that purpose, and you need the business to promote trade and commerce. any country, every country, even in its own right, works for the people of the country. We're all doing commerce and trade, generating income, providing, getting out of poverty, helping the environment, helping more employability, is all done by the private sector. The government just does the policies. So unless the policies are right, we can't go ahead. So this is implicit that the civil society, the businesses, and the government have to work hand in hand. The other small example I'd like to give you, a friend from Pakistan recently visited, excuse me, visited Bangladesh. He is, I believe, the head of the textile business in Pakistan. Now he came to India, did his business there. From India, he flew to Bangladesh, did his business here, but he had no direct route of coming and going back and forth. So what I'm trying to say is, you can do business via Dubai, you can do business via Singapore or many other countries, but the fact is increasing the cost of doing business. That definitely hampers the economy and the profitability, and actually hinders you doing more business or promoting more trade. I would just like to give an example of our other regional partner, the ASEAN. The Association of South Asian Nations has successfully evolved into a well-knit and dynamic regional entity that is now a major force behind several economic cooperation initiatives between the South Asian countries and the rest of the world. ASEAN has also begun to actively promote interaction with non-members on issues of regional security. This being the case, on the other hand, several of our regional corporations in the region, including Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, Asia-Pacific Trade Agreement, the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, and SAARC, appear to be works in progress as their achievements to date have been limited. This raises an interesting question. Why do performances vary significantly among regional corporations? I have this question to myself as well. As I said earlier, internally, if you can't work without the government, externally, how can you work without government support? And we must ensure that certain bilateral issues or reservations should not affect the whole region. This is really impacting progress, for sure. We must be very blunt about it. I think for now, I'd like to stop here and we'll take it later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haider. I have two short questions coming from your comment, and maybe
Yes, sir.
you can quickly answer, right? I entirely agree with you on these non-tariff barriers, mutual recognition that the government is required. But I am also aware that most of these non-tariff barriers are imposed for your own domestic industry because you do not want the industry, the intra-regional trade to happen. So at one point of time, where the private sector has to cooperate with the government, the same private sector lobbies with the government for imposition on that non-tariff barrier so that the trade doesn't happen, right? Now, my question is, and still I'm asking, because we all are agitated, and I know private sector is more agitated than me. Why is it that, since you people are there in it, you know, in the WTO, the TRIPS came because of the US pressure, and that came only because of the pharma industry lobby there. I am also aware that in SAARC, the private sector has a strong lobbies with the governments to get what they want, at least at national level or for themselves. But why is it that all these private sectors of SAARC collectively could not transform the government thinking? I mean, if I am a government, I can impose non-tariff barrier for you in Bangladesh because I don't want the goods to come from India. I can delay the mutual recognition agreement sitting in India because I do not want the Bangladesh silk to come to India. This happens on the behest of private sector. But on the second hand, we all talk about, yes, it needs to happen. Why is it that the private sector, which is a driving force for the economy, has no say in such policy making? Unfortunately for SAARC, you go to the WTO, all the countries, India and Pakistan in the like-minded group in the WTO, they submit the papers together in the WTO, not in SAARC. Why is it? That is a question which I am unable to get an answer to. Maybe you
Well,
can
my
throw
first response is we don't practice what we preach. Okay. And in answer to your second question about why the business sector or the private sector is also equally responsible for this dilemma of NTBs and all that, that is correct. And that is why it's a very self-centered and very selfish view if you want to be more holistic amongst for doing trade in the region or in the rest of the world. Let me say something here. When you talked about that, why can't we do it independently? We must realize that the member states of SAARC and in many other regions as well are small to medium sized. In this specific case, India is the largest state, okay? And they literally cover more than half the percentage of the population of these 8 countries. So the power balance gets skewed. This has to be solved politically. This cannot be solved by business people. We can influence, we can force our governments to listen to us, to do this properly. But unfortunately, the fact is, just like what Mr. Zubair Malik said, is skewed and is the strong ones trying to rule the small ones. Is that the answer to your question?
I mean, basically, yes, because you know, this is a such a good topic that unless we speak from our heart, the sentiments will not be heard, and that is what I am trying to, you know, bring that fire in all of you. Yes, Malik Saab. I think I have put some fire in Malik Saab.
Let me add something, that we at the level of the private sector, we had a study carried out on NTBs and NTMs supported by ITC. And we specified the barriers from each country, all of the 8 SAARC countries, and the report was formulated and given to the governments. And here I quote an example. Because of that, the border between Bangladesh and India, they had to exchange 150 different documents to get their trucks cross the border. As a result of that, it has now reduced to about 27 or 28 documents only. So we, private sector, have been doing it. But sometimes governments have an interest. Now, let me quote you another example. In 2010, I think, when the Commonwealth Games were to be held in India, India was short of cement. And we negotiated with India to supply cement to India. And the first shipment of 50,000 metric ton was stuck up at Bombay port because they didn't have any specific testing labs there. And for that, luckily, we were in India and we approached the Indian Commerce Minister, Mr. Kamal Nath, at that time. And on a phone call, the thing was released. So this shows whether there are NTMs or not. In this part of the world, influence matters a lot. And again, on wheat, we export wheat to India, I think, a few years back. And the testing, it crossed from Wagah border, but the testing labs were located in the south of India. So look at the time. This is unspecified barriers. Why can't you have testing labs in Amritsar, where the trucks are crossing? So all are not at the private sector. We just pointed out, we put our pressures, we try to get the things resolved, and we have succeeded to a certain extent. But still, the political factor overrides the economic factors in this picture. That's the bottom line.
Unfortunately, so that's the real world. But okay, let me, yes, Mr. Heather wants to speak. something. Can somebody unmute you? Mr. Heather, you want to supplement? Please unmute yourself.
Yes, I've
Yeah.
unmuted myself. Right. I quickly just wanted to say something like Mr. Zubair Malik and myself came to know each other and many other friends in the SAARC region through the SAARC chamber. I might have been very specific in my business, like I do IT or whatever, and I would have met my fellow counterpart somewhere in one of the countries. But through the SAARC chamber, we have become a brotherhood. We entire countries, all these 8 countries are connected through their business communities, through the SAARC chamber. So the importance of this particular chamber cannot be emphasized at any level. Thank you. We need it.
Thank you very much. That's very valid point. Unfortunately, yes, it has become, as Malik Saab said, vice versa. Private sector driving the SAARC chamber, it's not happening, but it's happening. SAARC chamber is being handled by or dictated by the government. That
Legally,
political-
we are not being able to function legally, but informally or on our own, we are working in spite of the governments. Let's put it this way.
I mean, yeah, exactly. That is what I wanted to listen to. That what is the
Right.
way out? I mean, formal channels cannot happen. Informal channel, people to people contact, because that is what can change the narrative. And you all are very influential people among your own government. You can change the narrative. But okay, I will come to that later. Let me come to Dr. Poshraj Pandey, who is the chairman of Southie. He will give you a more balanced and a neutral view because he comes from a think tank. They always think, and there are a lot of tanks, a lot of ideas which are tanked in. Poshraj, tell me, what is your thought?
Okay, thank you, Rajan Bhai. Good afternoon, Salam Alaikum and Namaste. Well, let me inform this August gathering. There are other 6 countries in SAARC besides India and Pakistan. Well, let me start with the fact. I'm nature mother, partly nature mother and partly human being. Have contrived to fragment this South Asia region and denied people the benefit of geographical and cultural proximity. I was just looking at the report by the World Bank that was published in 2018. And it says that the total good trades between South Asian country could be 67 billion US dollar rather than existing, that time it was $23. And again, that report says formal trade between India and Pakistan would be US dollar 67 billion. That is 15-fold more than the existing trade. But as Ratna highlighted, in his statement, well, intra-regional bilateral trade in goods, it's 5%. And in services, it's less than 2%. And investment, intra-regional investment is also less than 2%. And here the question is, why South Asian countries are hesitant to interact economically with each other? And our intra-regional trade investment is quite low. I mean, for me, there are 4 or 5 deficits, and the region could be 4 or 5 deficits. The first and foremost is the trust deficit. I'll explain these issues. And second is trade deficit. I mean, all the member countries, SAARC member countries, have trade deficit with India. And if you increase trade, then your deficit will with India would increase. I mean, that kind of fear is there. And another deficit is infrastructure deficit. And third, and another is capacity deficit. I mean, we don't have capacity to fulfill the demand of our partner countries. And the fifth deficit is institutional deficit. That is institutional deficit at regional level as well as at bilateral level. Jubair Saab just mentioned, well, I mean, in order to overcome the problem of non-tariff barriers, we don't have this lab test at the board. There is institutional capacity, the institutional deficit. So here, I mean, just listening, Rajanji and my colleagues from Pakistan. Okay, I mean, let me elaborate on this, I mean, political issues. I mean, what I feel, I mean, is looking from far as an independent observer, the partition of Indian subcontinent in 1947 left some inedible scars in the mind of some group of people. And then interstate and intra-state conflict followed. Mistrust and enmity ingrained in the mind. So as a result, I mean, here we are talking about, I mean, this economic cooperation, economic integration. But this economic integration and economic cooperation lie outside the cost benefit analysis of material interest. So what prevailed is security issues and also the relative gain rather than absolute gain in trade. And as a result, I mean, this narrative has been constructed based on misconstrued perception. Oh, India is getting much more, I mean, benefit, or Pakistan is getting much more benefit. So do you have developed that kind of a misconstrued, I mean, perception? And similarly, you also, I mean, disseminate that kind of information and to general public, to politicians. And again, because of this mistrust, politicians and political parties in each country try to draw legitimacy from perpetuating hatred and animosity towards neighboring countries. It's not, I mean, between India and Pakistan, but it is also, it's between other countries also. And that way, I mean, a politician as manipulating this, that's the regional cooperation issues. So here the question is, how can build that, I mean, pressurize our politician, I mean, to opt for regional cooperation in South Asia. And the first thing is to build trust among ourselves. So what we are doing is we are trying to build trust through some sort of, I mean, confidence building measures. We have, I mean, track 1 diplomacy, we have track 2 diplomacy. We also formed, I mean, SAARC Chamber of Commerce, and we also have, I mean, bilateral Chamber of Commerce. And we also interact, I mean, in civil society, I mean, forum also. But I think all this confidence building measure has failed. And these measures need to be re-evaluated, to be redesigned, and to be rebuilt. That is one. And another I mean, point I want to raise is the fate of regional cooperation in South Asia should not be left to few politicians, to few, I mean, security officials and few bureaucrats. And what they have made us is Just, I mean, we are, they just left us in periphery and to make comments, I mean, like this. We are just making comments. I mean, that's the blunder of the politicians, and we are sitting here in the periphery and making comments. So what we need to do is we need to make the subject, the issue of regional cooperation, the subject of common people, the subject of, I mean, private sector, and the subject of the all stakeholders. And for this, I think, I mean, we have also some sort of shortcomings, particularly, I mean, private sector, academia and civil society. I mean, we have not been able to communicate properly with the stakeholders, I mean, with the common people, about the benefit of cooperation and about the cost of non-cooperation. So, I mean, if we can properly communicate to stakeholders, then politicians and political parties will be forced to include issue of cooperation, regional cooperation, in their election manifesto, political agenda, and they will be forced to make the issue of regional cooperation in parliamentary discussion. So we might have failed, I mean, on these aspects. And fourth issues like, well, I mean, we haven't properly identified, could be, I mean, properly identified the areas for regional cooperation. Well, so I mean, here, how can we benefit out of regional cooperation? One, if any sectors which have, I mean, which have positive externalities, then if we want to exploit those positive externalities, cross-border positive externalities, then that area, that sector would be appropriate for cooperation. And another, I mean, areas which have negative cross-border externalities, but will, if we benefit, I mean, if we can combat those negative externalities. So if we think, I mean, that way, I think, I mean, we can get benefit of this cooperation.
Thank you.
Okay, I stop over here.
Thank you, Pushpai. Thank you for your very thought-provoking deficits 5-pointer which you talked, and we discussed and deliberated more on institutional deficit and other things. But since the time is limited, and I know there might be many people from the floor who might be wanting to speak. Let's not deliberate in the last 15 minutes to the narratives which is happening, but what needs to be done to bring this change. I understand everybody is frustrated with the political system, and I also understand that the political bosses also know that the whole people at large are frustrated with it. The warmth among people to people, private to private sector, academia to academia. And to be very honest, if you see, this is a very famous quote in one of the Hindi movies, गरीब की कोई जात नहीं होती ना उसका कोई धर्म होता है. The poor neither has a caste nor a religion. He remains isolated and is stranded on one corner. How this narrative can be changed? I open the floor. I mean, anybody who wants to speak or have something, otherwise then I go back to the panel. Please raise your hand. You have mics, right? Please introduce yourself and speak.
Assalamu alaikum. My
Hello.
name is Asfahan. I am from Naval University. Sir, as your question is regard, according to me, sir, changing this narrative needs bringing those people who are marginalized in our, starting from us, in our conversations, in our participations, in any project, in anything. That refers to inclusiveness on any platform that is, there we can engage people with us. And starting from our scholars, starting from our, as you said, think tanks, they can engage people or just change this narrative from bottom to higher levels. Sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Yes, yeah, there you go. Madam. Sorry, sir, you wanted to speak. I'll come to you. No, no, no.
Okay. I'm Sahar Malik. I'm president of Women Chamber Lahore division. Actually, one of the key factor which I believe is I'm actually practitioner of procurement and supply chain. So this is what I think that is one of the major reason that we need to have account, the procurement specialists who are license holders who can actually bring this whole value chain, and we can have the accountability of how this whole value chain is going to work for import and export. So this is one of the suggestions which I wanted to make.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, there. Saab.
Thank you very much. Mia Shaukat Masood. I'm former president, Islamabad Chamber of Commerce Industry. Whatever we have listened just now from all of you, and what we understand is that the countries which under the SAARC region we have the highest population. We need the to do, I think, all sorts of housing, food, etc., whatever you know. So I personally felt that for so many years now, this SAARC countries are not being together, as Mr. Zubair Malik has already said in his talk. So I believe that we need to come out of all these things which been developing with either the countries, whether it is between India or Pakistan or others. I think time has come up because we are facing an economic meltdown in all over the world, and we being the poorest countries in all over the world, we are facing more trouble than I think Western countries could have done. And moreover, we have in Pakistan, we have suffered the flood, the disaster, which is need to be taken care of. So I think time has come that we should all get together and come on this wonderful platform and solve these problems. And to come out of all these crises, we need to promote trade between the two countries, all the countries of the SAARC. So I think there is a time to get out of this and get this sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Adnan, I've been an executive member for 4 years, SAARC Chamber of Commerce Industry, and my question will be is that my comments will be that the other countries among the SAARC should learn from Pakistan, because the business communities in Pakistan have persuaded their government to talk with the other countries and solve the problem. And our government is there to listen to us, and we accept that from India also, because it's a prerogative of your business community to persuade the Indian government to come up. We have the differences, and the differences is going to be there for many years now. It's going to be there. So I think we should leave the differences, the political differences we have, but we should start our trade. In 8 hours, you can reach from Baga to Torkham, and in 8 hours, we can reach the Delhi. So I think you can gain more than what we can gain. So the mindset in Delhi has to be changed, because of our two countries, the SAARC is not performing very well. The SAARC is not performing, and And this is a beautiful forum where we have met many people. I remember when I used to travel all over the SAARC chamber was flourishing. But day by day, things are deteriorating among the SAARC chambers. So I personally think this is my request to you that you to send this message to your government in Delhi. Please persuade them that whatever the political differences or will be there, but start the economic trade because it's very much needed here. It's needed there also, and you will gain more than what we can gain.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Sir, I'm Mukit. I'm Director SAARC at the Foreign Office. To be the devil's advocate, I would just like to say that SAARC is a regional platform, and the countries in this platform are going to determine how it is going to function, whether it will be inert or it will be active. It is totally the collective political will of these countries. And these countries have their own agendas. SAARC was not supposed to be a political debating ground, but it has turned in one, unfortunately. So I believe unless the stakeholders, the non-state stakeholders, particularly the business community and the environmentalists, if they can exert pressure, then we may see a thaw. Otherwise, this is going to be just another debating forum, nothing else.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So we got another. Ji, Mole, please. Sure.
I am Tariq Abdul Majid. I was just wondering that basically you need to think about the interventions. And interventions can be from inside out, and interventions can also be from outside in. And to what extent SAARC Chamber of Commerce think empowered that they can engage WTO and the other international trade bodies so that they can influence the countries concerned. Normally, when the trade blocs are formed, they are formed so that they can talk to each other. But when they're not talking to each other and they're not resolving their problems, that is where you need interventions. You need to think about what else you can do. And that is my suggestion, in fact, that how to engage. It can be done from the government. You can force the governments, your governments. You can talk to other trade bodies. And since the trade is not only within this area, within this SAARC region, you are also doing trade with the other trade blocs. So to what extent they can be helpful, and they can also help SAARC Chamber of Commerce to come up with some solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, sure, yes.
May I please intervene? So we have with us Mr. Shakil Munir, former President, Islamabad Chamber of Commerce, and also Dr. Safdar Sohail, and we'll be grateful if we can have few thoughts from them as well.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Safdar Sohail. He's the gentleman who negotiated this, no, not SAFTA, but free trade, European Union, GSP plus. He's the person who negotiated this, and we would definitely like to hear something from him.
He's already foresighted. Yeah.
सफदर साहब, आप इधर आए। आपको सुनने के लिए बहुत लोग बेचैन हैं, मैं भी।
Thank you very much, Chair and Priya and Malik Sab. I remember an article which I wrote in Insight, Trade Insight. There was, I have been a great proponent of South Asian regional integration. And I remember when I was Director General Pakistan Institute of Trade and Development and then DG Trade Policy, there was such an active South Asian trade policy community and meeting frequently. There's a lot of hope also. And the colleagues have shared the current problems. One could be dispirited, disappointed, but in that article, I took this position that in the region like ours, incremental approaches would never work. That was 2008. That the countries have more or less similar production structures, which basically means similar defensive positions and similar offensive positions. And the region is so close that distance does not matter. So between Lahore and Amritsar, people even now take rickshaw from Amritsar and come to Atari and then take another rickshaw and come here. So which basically mean, I mean, at one level, the models would say that the trade should be more, but I personally think we cannot avoid using the context of domestic commerce when actually we are talking about the trade between India and Pakistan or Nepal or India. Now, there the defensive interest could be very strong. So what I suggested in that article was that we need a big bang approach on that with due care to the adjustment requirements for a fuller integration involving investment integration, services integration, and movement of people. You see, when you talk about the integration of investment and services, people cannot be left behind. Though now we have Mode 1 coming up across the border, but to have that kind of a trust where investment can follow the efficiency, let's say, within the region, this is possible. This region has been a very prosperous region, integrated and prosperous, but this adjustment costs imagining it, and then to have some such arrangement where you can bridge this period for 10-15 years to let the investment seek the efficiencies in terms of productivity, that is a major challenge. So I mean, the deficits Mr. Pandey has talked are all there, but that big bang moment we expected in 2012. I was at the ministry that we were very close to that, you know, that MFN, and we were creative enough to come up with alternative terms than the most favorite one, because that was creating some problem कि जी पसंदीदा तरीन मुल्क आप बना देते हैं उस नेबर को जिसके साथ that would so creativity and imagination. I mean, just imagine the loss that this food bank, for example, the SAARC food bank. I mean, we could have benefited so much in all these crises that we are facing. So in that context, we have wasted a lot of time, which also means that the countries have gone their own way too. In developing, they always had alternatives, and hypothetically, one would say that the trade potential is there, but I think that also needs to be taken with a pinch of salt. I myself did a study on the potential of textile exports between India and Pakistan. The potential which we found, or I found, were very limited, because all that we produced is produced by India also. So India was at that time, now the trade is incidentally closed. At that time, India was importing only those textile items which had some companies would have emergency requirements or some very unique kind of things. So there, I mean, you cannot imagine normal trade expansion in textile sector. But yes, if due to environmental reasons, if there could be now some, let's say, technical textiles or technology-driven things. Yesterday also, I suggested that now the world is changing, and Europeans, Australians, Americans are openly talking about near-shoring to have more protected value chain. So the decoupling is taking place, we accept it or not. So maybe now is an opportunity to create awareness on the implications of degrowth and decoupling. And as the global financial system now has started hurting developing countries much more than before, just imagine the case of the interest rate hike by the Fed. The way that one decision is impoverishing us all, or the debt burdens that we are carrying, I see some Rajan, green shoots of cooperation coming up at the international fora. In COP27, for example, in loss and damage, I think we were together. So situation is perhaps creating some space, and there I think if your office and other partners can re-engage with SAARC Secretariat, you see that animal is problematic. SAARC Secretariat has to behave more like the ASEAN Secretariat. The example was given here too. So this is the time to create a quality knowledge where we could and should talk now about cooperation. Integration is still problematic, and I think we are not ready for regional integration. I was Pakistan's lead negotiator for China-Pakistan Economic Corridor with the Chinese on long-term plan and industrial cooperation. In problems, the serious problems, and at least us and maybe some other countries, we are in this phase of deindustrialization. So I mean, we have to be much more careful. And now another area, before I conclude, is the big push which is coming from the global entities for liberalization of services sector, for example, health. Now, health and food security and climate change and technology and development of local financial systems and financing with the appearance of new financial giants in India and China. I think if we can present a case on merit that these cooperative activities can benefit the region more, if when the next, God forbid, epidemic hits, what would happen in terms of food security and health. So we need to identify a new set of public goods. I personally think deeper trade integration is no more, or at least for the moment, a common public good seen by the people of South Asia. So let's put it on the back burner and bring these new issues which touch the ordinary people. We have talked about the people-to-people contact. I would say that phraseology also needs to change. It's not a question of contact, because there are issues when we talk about people-to-people contact. This is the common interest of South Asian citizens, which has existential threats of poverty, of health, of climate disaster. So at that level, if we can share the experiences and can show some hope, and it is at multiple levels. And there, the last thought, which particularly Rajan, you can take up, India is having the presidency of G20, for example. Now, G20 is appearing as a forum where these new possibilities are coming up. I myself, when Germany had the presidency of G20, so they initiated a process called T7 Think 7. So that was an international forum of think tanks, and I was representing Pakistan in that. So there were a lot of working groups. I was working on social exclusion, which is an extremely important thing. So if we can work with the G20 presidency of India, which would not be through SAARC, by the way, which the think tanks have to do it directly, and your organization should be in a better position. Or if we can engage with Shanghai Cooperation Organization, that again is coming up as another forum where countries are making some accommodation with others. And now SCO has started talking about trade and investment. So financing is perhaps in SCO we can talk about financing, and the emergence of fragmented energy markets is a huge challenge as well as opportunity if we can work on that also, to how to secure regional energy security in the wake of what is happening in the world. So I think if we start with new set of issues and create quality knowledge and engage critical stakeholders, we can see some movement. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
May I now request Mr. Shakil Munir for few thoughts concerning developing this political will for regional cooperation. Please, if we can have share the mic with him, or sir, you can please join us on the stage.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much. First of all, I acknowledge Zubair Saab effort for the SAARC Chamber of Commerce Industry. There is, I think we saw him a lot of effort he has done in the past years, and I think this is the time that every country facing inflation problem. And if SAARC countries must improve their barter trade between each country, that will more helpful for every country, because we have a lot of potential in the trade sectors. Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, they have a lot of potential in different items, Bangladesh. And we can I think, if we can improve barter trade, that will be very much helpful to overcome the inflation issues and to transfer the payments to the other countries. So I think we can search some way out that how we can improve the barter trade. There is so many things that we can provide. Pakistan can explore. India is very much rich in so many products, and we are already importing some product from India also. We in the past we also export some product to India also. For the Bangladesh, we have also a lot of potential. Sri Lanka, we have potential, and if we can find out some way out how we can improve by the barter trade, this will be very much helpful for I think SAARC countries, and we can improve our trade also. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was definitely an insightful discussion and generating a debate on how to change this political will that is necessary for any business cooperation in the region. And we are extremely grateful to the chair of the session and our distinguished panelists. We are grateful to Dr. Rajan Sudesh Ratna for not only being the chair, but also the moderator, and also for the insightful remarks in the capacity of panelists. And also immense thanks to Mr. Zubair Ahmed Malik for joining us, to Mr. Shafkat Haider for joining online from Bangladesh, to Mr. Dr. Posh Raj Pandey for being on the panel, and also to Dr. Safdar Suhail for giving really useful insights at the end of the session. Now I would like to request Mr. Zubair Ahmed Malik to formally present the study titled COVID-19 and Regulatory Innovations in South Asia. This study has been done in collaboration with SAARC by STPI, and it's a formal report launch. So, sir, if you can do the honors of presenting this study to the chair of the session, Dr. Rajan Sujesh Ratna.
Study on the COVID-19 and how the SAARC has been. Excellent. Before we conclude the session, there will be one or two remarks I would like.
Sure, please, sir. Please, if you can come on.
We have, thank you, Chair, for allowing me to conclude with my thoughts. It's been a very thoughtful session, and I'm glad that a lot of questions have come in from our audience as well. But will we let it go like this? That we came, we met, we had a nice time, and we left the venue? No, sir. At least I will not. I put in a good 25 years of my life into SAARC, and I would like to see it prosper. I would like to suggest two things, two very important things. Let's forget India and Pakistan. Let's totally neglect them for the time being. Mr. Shakil, can we have your... Let's forget India and Pakistan. There are 6 other countries. They have to play a role. Until and unless they stand up independently, the very theme, the political will, is for them to show political will, stand up to India and Pakistan and tell them, no, we will not let this forum sink or die a natural death. We are going to put life into this forum. We are going to put life into the 40 million people of this subcontinent living below the poverty line, and we are going to make sure that this region prosper. A very important remarks came from our worthy president of Women Chamber. Clusters, yes, clusters do play a very, very important role. And we will like to see the things develop. What is a political will? The political will is a resolve to address the issues head on, face on. But what's happening in the subcontinent is to save the vote bank and not to face the issues head on. Thank you very much.
The lunch is served, so I won't be in the way between you and the lunch. And may I please request a group photo of the panelists?
I'm the unlucky one. No food for me.
Food for thought.